Alright, camera's recording. Carpo's chilling out in front of his house here, talking to myself about, third person here? Well, I guess I'll do this is just say, hey, this is basically an installment of, Carpo's mental health bullshit series. I've, the last few days, been talking about various aspects of mental health, whether it be addictions or brain chemistry, and it's been a prominent subject in many of my videos. And especially lately. So this one will be no different. And I wanted to tackle this, I guess the idea that, I talked earlier about happiness and what makes us happy, right? Or rather, what we think makes us happy. Sorry, the car just slowed down there. That was weird. So, anyway, we're talking about happiness and whether we delude ourselves or how happy we actually are, and how we have to have a variety of different, troughs and crests of the waves in order to seek happiness. And as the ancients believed, in the mystery schools, it was taught that, it's funny, I thought of the term as above, so below, but that's not at all what I was thinking of. But it's very similar, but a completely different meaning. As above, so below means that, the universe is reflected in each atom, so to speak. But it could mean also as above, so below in the sense of the pendulum swing, where once you've felt extreme sadness, you can feel extreme elation, and vice versa, but it's difficult to feel one or the other. If you don't know what pleasure is, it's hard to even know what pain is. That may become the norm. And kind of off subject, this is why I don't believe in hell. Because the idea of a hell implies that a person could truly suffer forever. And to me, suffering forever doesn't seem to be anything that's possible. It's just we eventually fade, and that pain becomes the norm by contrast. So, anyway, moving on. What I wanted to really talk about here was during our happiness and sadness, how many mood swings do you as an individual have each day? And I guess I'm just speaking kind of semi-rhetorically and semi-inquisitively at the same time. I'm actually curious to know how other people react in their day-to-day life as far as their emotions. Now, in order to answer this question, you have to obviously be aware of yourself and your emotions. And this requires you being the mediator or the observer between the observer and yourself, which means that you step outside yourself and watch your emotions and your intentions and your reasons for doing things. For example, if you raise your voice against your children, you step and ask yourself why afterwards instead of just justifying it, or see if it was really necessary. Or if you're getting ready to do a business practice, ask yourself if you're being fair, and look at yourself, not what would the average person do, or, well, this is what other people do, or this is just life, but rather, is this consistent with my values and integrity? Now, people who speak of integrity often become accused of being pious or arrogant because they say, well, what is integrity? Well, integrity means you integrate. It's very simple. It means you've learned to integrate yourself into the world properly. This means that integrity varies among cultures, but there are some consistent values that we all share. So trying to maintain this integrity, and I'm going to get back to my main subject here, which is when you have this integrity and if you learn intelligence, and I mentioned in a video yesterday that they say that folks who are, more intelligent tend to, on average, not be as moody, but I tend to, or I should say they don't swing as extremely. And I guess I could see that. Not many intelligent, except for there are sociopaths and other various, brain, let's just not get into that. Point being that, yes, there are different types of people in every group that are angry or get out of hand, but that I guess it could go either way with a person who has integrity. I mean, is a person with integrity, do they go off the handle? Do they lose their temper? In other words, is that a value that a person can hold, that maybe not a value, but something that they consider to be justified or reasonable. And I don't think that anger is very often justified. For example, let's talk about spanking your children, just to get my point across. A lot of folks will say, never spank your children. A lot of folks would say, you have to spank your children. And in between, there are many people who would say, oh, sometimes, or for the right reasons. Now, as a parent, I've always told myself that I would never spank my child, but I have tended to swat their butts a couple times. When? When they were putting themselves in danger. One time when he was touched something hot or fire, and the other time when he could have slipped and break his head, those kind of things, where they just will not listen. And then you say, well, now I'm breaking my own rules. And my point here is that sometimes we do have to bend our own values. We realize that nothing is black and white. Even murder can be justified. It wouldn't be murder, it would be self-defense, but rather killing someone can be justified if they're trying to harm your family or yourself. And so, what this means is that the average person has a lot to think about. And during your daily thoughts, in your daily life, it can be easy to become really happy at one moment, and then at the next moment just be kind of overwhelmed with life and go, wait a minute, wow, life's short, or I'm getting older. And then the next day you wake up and you think, oh, I don't care, I got all this, all this energy left and all this time and all these fun things I want to do. Then the next day you're like, well, what do I want to do? And this can go on and on as a cycle. And, I'm not going to get into the psychology of it because I'm not a psychiatrist, but I do believe that, the idea of bipolar disorder, can be tied into this extremes of behavior that we all tend to have. It's almost like you can't control that faucet. I would say that, perhaps bipolar is like having one of those really touchy bathtub faucets where you just barely bump it and it gets overly hot. You go, oh, turn it down and it's too cold. And I think that everything in our world is like that. We all are a little bit autistic. We're all a little bit arrogant. We're all a little bit ignorant. We're all a little bit ADD and we're all a little bit OCD. We have every fucking disorder you can imagine, and that's being human. Finding your niche and using that to your advantage is important. So besides talking about mood swings, I want to know if people have ever tried to use, OCD to their advantage. Now, I don't really like the definition of OCD or ADD, because attention deficit disorder, you can be attention deficit because you're compulsive about something. So I don't know how much these are really tied together and which brain chemistry is involved. And in fact, I'd like to think that sometimes that, I'm afraid to talk about certain subjects because I believe that there's all this, evidence or neuroscience to explain things that I should research first. Then I go to research it and find out that it really isn't. Things like dopamine, how it's considered the pleasure-seeking compound, but they come to find out that it's also not just reward, but the punishment compound that tells you and prepares you for punishment. People who can be obsessed with elation, like skydiving, or they can be obsessed with things like sadism, masochism, self-abuse, flagellation. It's a crazy world. People have all kinds of different flaws, and and not that those are flaws. People just have their own thing. People have their own flaws and they have their own greatnesses, and this is what makes us people. But when we look at the people from the inside, when we look at people through the windows of our soul, through our eyes, and see them, we only see them through our perspective. And of course that's changing from each person to person. But on top of that, we also don't know the true them. And we don't know if they're really happy inside. You might call it the Facebook syndrome. You've got hundreds of people wanting to be friends with each other, and then all they can do is talk about either, how bad their time was or how great their time was. But there's a lot of folks who just want to make it seem like their lives are great. And there's an actual syndrome for people becoming depressed because it seems like others are happy and they're not. But, not everybody goes and posts negative things or their bad events, or they don't talk about their personal life, which is probably good a lot of the time, but it gives a false image that people are happy. And I could tie that right into my videos. I make videos and I've had people say, how can you always be positive, or how can you be like this or like that, or so calm? I'm like, yeah, a lot of the time I'm pretty calm and collected, but you know what? I have my moments. We all do. We're just humans. And I feel like pacing up and down my driveway and looking around at nature, I can really open up more on camera, and it makes me want to just do like a podcast where I can just walk through the woods and just talk about these things. But I've been saying that for like 2 years. This was the Carpo After Dark series that I started last year, and once in a while I feel inspired, and that's perfect to tie in, because I'm glad I remembered that, because there are moments when I want to make a video, and other moments where I just don't have the motivation, but I have a subject I want to talk about. And then there's other times when I do have the motivation, or I should say, there's times when I have the motivation but no subject to talk about, and there's times when I have no motivation but a subject I do want to talk about. And I used to take notes, but now I just let the thoughts, flow freestyle, and just kind of wherever it leads me, and if I forget something, then it'll come up if it's important, If you love a philosophical idea, forget it, and if you remember it, it was meant to be. It'll come back to you if it truly loves you. So I'm now I'm standing here by my car. I'm a deadhead. And I like Burning Man. And I got this Bernie sticker. Base heads for Bernie. And, looking at them while I'm standing here, I just, it's an announcement that, yes, I'm a hippie. I listen to the Grateful Dead, and I go to Burning Man because I'm different and I'm alternative, and I vote for Bernie, and I'm a bass head. I love music, and the things that we do to advertise ourselves. And I've kind of tried to embrace that a lot more. There have been some moments where I've had some kind of revelations about what it means, what style means, because some of my, let's say, since intense psychedelic experiences in the last year or so, I've kind of had this joke in my mind, look at me, and it's because I see how people are always striving to be seen. Maybe not by other people online, but maybe people in their family, or maybe people only online and not in their because they don't get any attention in their family. And people deserve attention, they deserve love, they deserve respect. And I think that the mood swings and problems that we have often stem from this lack of that respect, that lack of love. And those who are unloved feel unwanted, and that's a hard one. Some people are stubborn enough to think that humans don't need companionship, and I would beg to differ. But alas, we are just humans. We make mistakes, and we go about our days. A little bit earlier, I was kind of sitting on the couch, and I was talking to my son, and he brought up a question about something. It was just random in conversation. Something about the size of it all, and life cycles, casually, things we talk about all the time. But from a 6-year-old, the mouth of babes comes something about life so profound. He said something, I had to write it down, and I don't recall now what it was, but I did write it down. And he's told me several things that are just blow my mind, and because I listen, and I realize that kids aren't compromised by their programming, so they can think about things on a level that parents just don't understand. And how coincidental that I would say that, because a friend of mine posted that yesterday on Facebook, actually, a picture of DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, a cassette tape of the Parents Just Don't Understand single that came out in the 80s. And anyway, that's way off subject, but perfect timing. So, what else can I say? I mean, I can sit here and ramble all day about being human and being alive, but what really matters is family and truth and loving one another. I think that was actually what my youngest son said. Well, my medium son. Speaking of, here's my oldest son. He's 21. That's Raistlin. What's up, Raist? I was just making a video, so I just thought I would say hi.
Hi.
You got any philosophical thoughts for the evening? I was talking about what it means to be alive.
Well, there's a lot to it.
Yep. See? He
Bam.
knows. Bam.
Can't explain it. Sorry.
I'm out.